Welcome. My name is Jody Williams. I am the Executive Director of the American Society of Botanical Artists. We're pleased to be hosting our very first live webinar featuring the launch of ASBA's new book, Botanical Art Techniques, a comprehensive guide. With its 412 pages and over 900 photographs, it is, as expressed in a review by the Council on Botanical and Horticultural Libraries, staggering in scope. Library Journal calls it one of the most comprehensive books on botanical illustrations, and Booklist Review says it is a spectacular how-to book. Botanical Art and Artists claims it is the brand new standard reference book for botanical art instruction. Today, we are fortunate to have the editors of the book, Carol Wooden and Robin Jess, with us to share the behind-the-scenes story of how the book came about. And let me be the first to publicly thank them for their spectacular work, taking this daunting project from conception to fruition. Carol Wooden is the Director of Exhibitions for the American Society of Botanical Artists. She has been a botanical artist for 30 years and is the recipient of the 2018 ASBA James White Service Award, the 1998 ASBA Diane Bouchier Artist Award, the Orchid Digest Medal of Honor, and a Royal Horticulture Society Gold Medal. Robin Jess is the Botanical Art and Illustration Certificate Coordinator for the New York Botanical Garden and former Executive Director of the American Society of Botanical Artists. She is the recipient of the 2016 ASBA James White Service Award, and in 1990, she was awarded a Distinguished Artist Fellowship by the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. Robin also illustrated several textbooks for the New York Botanical Garden. Also with us are 4 of the 52 contributing artists who provided tutorials for the book. We welcome Laura Call-Gastinger, Wendy Hollander, Margaret Best, and Kelly Radding. If you have questions during the program, you may submit them via the Q&A feature on your webinar, and depending on time, we'll attempt to answer as many of your questions as possible at the end of the program. So without further ado, I turn it over to Carol Wooden.
Welcome everyone, and thank you, Jody. We're all so excited that after several years of planting, watering, and pruning, this tree of a book is finally going to bear fruit. Robin and I are going to start by traveling back to the book's inception and how the project began. Many of you may recall that ASBA had a 20-year-long collaboration with the Horticultural Society of New York in producing our annual international exhibition. Sarah Hobel, the director of the Hort, suggested we should consider doing a book, and she put us in touch with the publisher at Workman Publishing, who has their main office in New York. Timber Press in Portland, who was our imprint, is an imprint of Workman. We first discussed a couple different ideas relating to botanical art, but everyone thought the idea of a one-stop instructional book would be the best fit. And once that decision was agreed upon, we had to draw up a detailed proposal for the book and lay out a draft table of contents. And throughout the years of the project, we really did adhere to that table of contents pretty closely. So in early 2016, our proposal estimated that we would produce 75,000 words, 350 pages, and around 900 images. I looked up those numbers for this event, and I was really shocked at how close we were, considering that neither Robin nor I have ever done a book before. We ended up with a manuscript of 75,477 words. We had about 950 images. And Timber kindly expanded the length of the book to 412 pages. So Robin is going to talk a little bit about the next stage.
So the next phase was we had to present the idea to ASBA's board, and the board thought that the book would be a perfect fit with our mission. which is to provide a thriving, interactive community dedicated to perpetuating the tradition and contemporary practice of botanical art. ASBA is known for how generous its members are in sharing concepts and techniques, and this book is an extension of that. Once Timber Press agreed that a book on botanical art techniques would be successful and ASBA's board was behind the book, the first thing I had to do was find a literary agent. Timber Press presented ASBA with a contract, a lot of which I did not understand, and I found that a very well-known horticultural author and photographer, Rick Dark, had attended the University of Delaware, my alma mater. So I contacted him and he very generously gave me some pointers and access to his agent, Helene Leger. She lives in the Netherlands. So the timing of our meetings was a challenge, but she did a wonderful job. After a little back and forth tweaking with Timber Press, we agreeably signed the contract in fall of 2016, about 4 years ago. Part of the contract was that this would be the only book Carol and I would work on until it was completed. Let me tell you, this was not a problem. Carol and I were both working for ASBA, and there would have been no way to do anything else.
So first I'm going to talk about how we decided what the book would contain by leading into the early pages in the book. And we wanted the main focus of the book to be on those media that are most frequently used in botanical art. So we wanted the book to cover graphite over here in part one. Part one was devoted to botanical subjects in black and white, with a chapter on graphite skills and pen and ink. And then botanical subjects in color is part two, with a chapter on colored pencil, watercolor on paper, watercolor on vellum, which we felt was really undercovered in previous instructional books. Then we wanted a chapter that also kind of was devoted to specialized techniques, because we thought curious artists and those who enjoy looking at art would be interested in these techniques and how they're done. And both Robin and I wanted a substantial chapter on composition, because it's not frequently covered and it really is where the rubber hits the road with botanical art. So in the composition chapter, we have some working examples of composition from study to final, and a section on the principles and element of composition, and then some examples on the way different artists use different aspects of composition in their work.
From the beginning, Carol and I felt that the strength and uniqueness of ASBA's book would be to present the techniques of many botanical artists. We wanted the book to encompass the rich variety of approaches in the genre, rather than suggest a formula or one size fits all. Our goal was to show the individual ways artists create botanical art. Practical aspects covered in the book include caring for flowers that are easy to acquire, and we know that that means keeping the flower fresh long enough to finish the painting, as well as working with wild plants in the field. A section with Mieko Ishikawa, painting in the rainforest of Borneo, is an excellent example of a master painter going the distance. Another very personal aspect is artist studio setups. Arguably, the element that makes us botanical artists is understanding the science and morphology of plants. So we were privileged to have artist and botanist Dr. Dick Rao supply us with basic chapter on botany. Another way artists vary greatly and debate about is their palette choices. Some use a very limited 6-color palette and others use a 60-color palette. A section on palette philosophy by Marilyn Garber helps to clarify all that.
So in order to show our tutorial sections in a user-friendly and clear way, we decided the 5 major media would be divided up into 3 sections. Basic tutorials showing the techniques themselves, such as this tutorial from my basic techniques of watercolor on vellum. Applied techniques, which applied those basic techniques to a single subject, such as this page spread from Hee-Young Kim's graphite flower tutorial, and advanced tutorials, which show an entire artwork from start to finish, like this spread from Asuka Hishiki's advanced watercolor tutorial, showing dry brush and masking fluid and painting one of her famous tomatoes. And we had planned dividers for sections, like this one by Unique Nabrojo for part 2, Botanical Subjects in Color. But Timbers designers also added divider pages for each artist tutorial, which really added to the visual appeal of the book. As you can see here in the late Lizzie Sanders chapter divider, showing her beautiful finished painting of Vanilla Imperialis. So we had to select artists for all the planned tutorials at each level, and also for the divider and other spot images. Robin and I made up a list of potential participants, and as Robin mentioned, ASBA has such a wealth of generous and talented artists, and many are accomplished teachers in geographically diverse locations and who are digitally adept. And those were the 3 main considerations in choosing contributors. We really were spoiled for choice. Everyone we approached was willing to share, so we had many favorable responses, but not everyone was able to participate for one reason or another. Along with the materials we provided to each tutor, we sent this rather notorious document that everyone received as a visual guide in photographing their tutorials and writing their text. This was a do's and don'ts, showing photographs of things done improperly, such as poor color balance, as you can see on the left with the yellow photograph, and dark shadows under the hand. And once we got everything all together, once all the materials came in, we placed the text and the photographs into an InDesign file, mainly to keep them in order for ourselves. We just really wanted to be able to keep track of everything, and we wanted to set the book in order so that we knew when pieces were missing. We asked our first tutorial producer to test this guidance and offer suggestions, and that was Catherine Waters.
ASBA was honored to have worked with Timber Press, which is internationally recognized as the leading garden publisher. The staff at Timber Press were professional, patient, and very accomplished. From our first meetings with Tom Fisher, we worked through different stages with different staff, and all were very capable, creative, and knowledgeable. We thank them.
So now we're going to visit with our first artist tutor, and that will be Laura Gastinger. Laura Call Gastinger was a chief illustrator for the Florida of Virginia after receiving a master's degree in plant ecology. She has been awarded 2 gold medals at the Royal Horticultural Society show in London and has shown her work in numerous ASBA exhibitions and at the Hunt Institute for Botanical Documentation. Laura contributed to 2 sections of the book, an applied tutorial in sepia tone watercolor and one about her perpetual journals in specialized techniques.
Thank you so much, Carol and Robin, for including me in this project. I'm Laura Call Gastinger. My studio is based in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the tutorials that I put together. As many of you know, I do like painting in sepia, and I use Schmincke sepia paint, and I feel like this is, it's always been a color I've gravitated towards. And so in this particular tutorial, I have an elm tree in my backyard, And this time of the year, the leaves are just curling up and falling from my tree. And so, you know, as botanical artists, we all draw what's around us. And so these always intrigue me because you can draw the top of the leaf and the underside of the leaf. And so if Carol could show my PDF, I'll talk a little bit through the basic steps. So the great thing about painting in sepia is this is a great exercise if you're a beginner to botanical watercolor on paper. So what it will do is you minimize the distraction of mixing colors, and you just focus on one color and building up values. And so you can see in this tutorial, I start with light washes, and so I put the paint where it's darkest, and then I immediately just go straight to dry brush, meaning that my brush is not very wet and the paint is very controlled and detailed. So I have a lot of control to make the lines and the venation. And so you can just see I start in the dark areas and build up the values with the sepia paint. And then as I go along, this is with the number 2 Raphael Kolinsky paintbrush. I start in the dark areas and I want to really make something look like it's curving. So that's what I was doing around the edge of the leaf, leaving the white, light paper where the raised veins are. So then eventually, it's a matter of just building up the layers, but it's all just one color. So it's sort of simplified. And then I switched to a smaller brush, like a number 0, and to get the smaller venations. And so a lot of times people say, oh, well, sepia, you know, when do you use it? And I think this is really used when you want to emphasize the unique structure of a particular plant. And if Carol, you want to, I want to show a piece of something so you can go back to my face. So in particular, like I have, many of you might have seen my root painting on Instagram. And so a root would be something where you really want to emphasize the structure. So sepia would work for that. The second technique that I'd like to tell you about is my perpetual journal. And I have 2. And so this is the second one. And this one is about 3 or 4 years full. And so the perpetual journal is a great way to maintain your drawing and observations of your natural world all around you. And so Carol, if you could share my PDF. In this technique, technique section, I explain some of the supplies that I use. And then on the next section, I talk about how you set it up and what does it even mean to be a perpetual journal. So the whole thing with the perpetual journal is you date your page, so that is actually a week or whatever time stamp you want it to be. And then you repeat and come back every year to that particular page or that week. So it alleviates a lot of pressure. You don't have to draw every day, but you become a really astute observer of your natural world. And so this tells you a little bit how to set up your journal by writing the date. And then I explain how I only use pen in my perpetual journal. I do not use pencil, and I encourage everyone my students to use pen, to embrace making mistakes, to capture the moment. And so I talk a little bit about that. I talk about plant observations and how learning the plants around you and their particular structure is really important. And that it can make you a better artist when you go to your studio. So there are samples of my pages, and I also even talk about some of the composition of the pages and how if you are starting off in the pages a little frightening, you can have branches come from the side, vines come from the top, wildflowers come up from the bottom. And then you can see how I do very small moments of color that just highlight what is out there. The important thing is that you're becoming an observer of nature. And I think that as botanical artists, we all crave that connection with nature. And so this is a way that you can become a citizen scientist and learn your plants around you, be a better observer and better drawing. So Carol, you can shut that, and I'll just wrap up and say that both of these techniques are really good if you're new to botanical art or any sort of nature observation. And so I hope you enjoy them, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Lara.
Wendy Hollander is a world-class botanical artist, author, and is an in-demand instructor who leads workshops throughout the world. Specializing in colored pencil, Hollander's illustrations have been published extensively. She has exhibited in natural history museums and botanical institutes, including a solo exhibit at the U.S. Botanic Garden. Wendy has authored 4 books on botanical drawing, including her most recent, The Joy of Botanical Drawing. Wendy contributed a tutorial to the applied section of the colored pencil chapter. Wendy?
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here with this group and really excited about the new book that just came out. And I'm here in my studio. I thought I would just, since it's always set up these days, I'm going to just tilt my screen for a minute so you can see actually what I'm working on right here. Let's see if I turn this light off. Yeah, you can even see it better. You can see, so for me, it's always about having the real specimen right there. And I'm drawing a pawpaw right now, which is a native fruit in our area here in the East Coast, or all up and down the East Coast. And you can see, I haven't even cleaned up for you. You can see how I work. It's a bit messy, but gets the job done. And I'm using a combination of polychromo Faber-Castell colored pencils, mixed mostly with, by the same company, Faber-Castell watercolor pencils that I use on a palette here with a brush, and sometimes I use regular watercolor as well. And some of the specialized tools that I use that I thought would be fun for the lesson that I'm doing, that I did for the book, is how I might use an embossing tool for specialized things such as fine hairs and whenever you want to leave a very skinny white space. So this is the artwork of the tutorial that we're about to see. And you know, when I find a subject I like to draw it and study it and paint it over and over again, because once you've done something once, you kind of get to know the plant a bit, and then it's really fun to go and revisit it several times over. So while Lara talks about revisiting the same week over and over each year, I like to revisit the same plants. And Carol, you want to show my presentation? So for this tutorial of rose hip, I chose a rose hip because I wanted a subject that was round and giving you a good opportunity to create a very three-dimensional sort of juicy form, because that's always what I like to do. In addition, there are little prickly hairs on the rose hip, so that would be a great opportunity to use the specialized embossing tool. There are, you know, sort of thorns on the stem, which are really interesting. Cutting open the rose hip gives you the opportunity to do seeds, which are really cool. And the rose hip itself has these really long, very lyrical sepals that are a pleasure to draw. And then the leaflet is distinctive on this Rosa rugosa plant, also making it fun to draw. So yeah, so getting a good subject is always a good start. And this tutorial is my current favorite way of working, which I say current because just like we're all developing artists, I'm always changing and evolving. To me, that's really a big part of the creative process, is to keep trying new things. So I applaud you all for being here today and showing an interest in so many of these techniques that will be shown in this book. So getting a good subject is most important. and then pruning it to get just enough so that you can make an interesting composition. And then I always start with a very light graphite drawing. I work right on my real paper. In this case, I was using Stonehenge Aqua watercolor paper. It's a hot pressed watercolor paper. I draw right on the paper because I'm really attached to the immediate quality of my drawing and the relationship with the live plant. And I think there's something about a real drawing that's done right on the spot that can never be duplicated. So I really try very hard by drawing very lightly to keep that immediacy with my drawing. From there, I take a neutral color pencil and I do a grisaille layer, not unlike also what Laura did with her sepia painting. And I get my light source how I want it, and I like to use the upper left lighting or upper right, depending on which way I'm doing it. I'm left-handed, so for me, I prefer my light from the right, but for this tutorial, I did it from the left because most people are right-handed. Once I create my grisaille drawing, so I do a redraw to get it precise with the color pencil, showing my shadow side, leaving a good highlight, the white of the paper, that's important. Then right after that, I went in with the embossing tool to leave some of those fine hairs on the rose hip itself. And Carol, you can go to the next page, please. And then over here, I'm doing a layer of the watercolor. So I move on. Once I've established my, my overlaps, my structure of my plant, my good light source, I do all that first. Then I go into a watercolor wash, starting with the lightest local color of the subject. In this case, it was kind of a yellowy gold because I was going to emboss again right after that because there are these little yellow spots on the rose hip itself. So I did that wash and then started adding color pencil on top of that layer in many different colors, just building the layers slowly back and forth with the different colors and working on the different areas of the plant. Maybe I'll do a watercolor layer later on, maybe not. It really just depends on the plant and what it's sort of talking to me about. In this case, I did the cross section at the bottom, which I love to do whenever possible, is to look inside the plant and add that to a drawing. And I often like to do a slight cast shadow in that case to ground the composition with the open specimen sort of giving the illusion that it's sitting on a surface. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Now we'll move on to Margaret Best. Margaret Best is an internationally renowned botanical artist and teacher. She teaches both group studio workshops as well as providing individual mentoring. She teaches on a regular basis in locations across Canada and has taught in more than 10 countries. Margaret has exhibited her botanical paintings around the world. And for our book, Margaret contributed an applied tutorial on painting leaves to the watercolor section.
Hello everyone, it's wonderful to be here. It's especially wonderful to be here because we have Hurricane Teddy bearing down on us, and I was expecting not to be a part of this as a result. But as luck would have it, we don't have the extremely high winds just yet. Like everybody else, I'm really honored to be included in this book, and it wasn't really a surprise that I was asked to show some information on how to paint leaves. And I chose two completely different ones to cover off three questions that I get asked frequently. One of them is, on dark leaves, how do I avoid overworking the paper with multiple layers that are needed to get to a dark color? The other question I get asked is, how can I capture all those tiny serrations on a multi-serrated leaf, and how do I keep those edges clean? And the third one, of course, which applies to all leaves, is how do I hold those veins and how do I get them into just the right spot? Like Wendy and the other artists, I completely endorse working from live specimens. The one leaf that I show in the book, which is the Burr oak leaf, which is a dark leaf. The other came right here from my own property, which I quickly snuck this morning in case there wasn't any left, which is the multi-serrated silver maple leaf. And Carol can show you both of those leaves as they appear in the book. I think you saw the first one. And both these tutorials cover off painting on a dark leaf, which you can see here, and how to do that without overworking the paper. Now, the question of overworking the paper is a really important one. And unfortunately, as watercolor paper has gone through its various transitions over the past few years, those surfaces are really delicate. So I avoid at all costs using graphite too much on the surface and avoiding the unnecessary erasing that comes along with that. So at the drawing stage, I draw in my sketchbook, I create the original drawing, and then I move fairly quickly to put all the vein structure that is visible, not under a microscope, but what's visible to the naked eye. And I put those onto the tracing paper. Now I'm going to share some images from a workshop that I taught in Paris, quite serendipitously 3 years ago exactly this week. And here is one of them, which shows you, I'll first show you this one, which shows you my actual oak leaf, and it shows you the tracing. The tracing, you can see I'm quite sketchy, but I have put in all the veins you can see. I don't bother with the veins that you can't see, which disappear into the highlight. I'm now going to share a second image with you, which shows you the artist in Paris. Where's my screen share gone away from me? It's disappeared. There we go. Share screen again. And here is an artist busy in Paris. You can see she's got her leaf here, and she's on her tracing paper, and she's examining all the veins she can see and putting that in. There's another artist here you're going to see later. She's got a small oak leaf, and she's doing the same thing, putting her all the veins that are visible. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And after that, I transferred simply the outline, no inner details onto your quality, ultra-sensitive watercolor paper. And the first thing we're going to do is put down a few washes. Now, Carol, that's really shown beautifully in the oak leaf. So I wonder if you could show that. The one that has the first washes. There we go. You can see that there. So I have applied first washes only onto the leaf. And then I take, that's with the pale washes, and I then take the leaf to the light table. And there's a wonderful image I have of an artist in Paris doing exactly that. And you'll see a few other things that she's doing. So Carol, I'll go back to a shared screen, and I will show the artist in Paris working on it. Here she is. Here is the artist here, and share. There she is. So she is working on a light table. You can see her first washes over here. She has over here what we prepare in the very beginning when we do our color matches. She has done her color matches in the small trough over here, paint tray over here, pale for the highlights, and 2 other color matches. And she's put them onto a special paper here that is a recyclable plastic. In fact, is made of recyclable plastics. And you can see that she has a very fine brush. She has her original specimen here to refer to. She's gone back onto the light table, lined it up over her leaf, and she is now applying the main leaves only, the main veins only. She's not putting in all those tiny little ones that we love to add. That comes later. She's only putting in the main leaves so she knows where they are. And this has eliminated the need for any graphite on the surface. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And I'm then going to show you a picture of an artist working on her leaf after she has finished that. And here I'm going to share this one, leaf number 3. This shows you the same thing that you saw the artist doing. This is her drawing with all the veins on it before she goes to the light table. And there's the leaf that she used. So now I'm going to take you now to layering up. After you've got the veins on, I then go to a stronger mix to avoid that repetitive layering and to protect your paper from being overworked. I now go to a stronger mix. I don't pre-wet my paper anymore, and I go directly onto the leaf in sections coming down the leaf. And here is an image of an artist who's doing that. So there's the veins that have been painted in quite clearly. Note only the main ones, the midrib, the central midrib, and the lateral veins, and just a hint of where some of the main ones that are visible. And then you can see she keeps her leaf nearby to get the information to finish it off. And I have her final leaf, and I will share that with you. I believe there it is. And this leaf was painted by Florence Gendre, which many of you may recognize. She's very active on Instagram and on Facebook. And there's her final leaf. She has all the main veins that you can see there. She's got highlights where they're supposed to be. These she would have lifted afterwards over the paint very carefully with a special lifting brush. But you can see how she's got the beautiful undulations of that leaf. So both those leaves, the maple leaf with its multi-serrations and a really dark colored leaf, is shown step by step in great detail in the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I have to say, you make it look so easy. I'd like to introduce multi-talented Kelly Lee Radding. Kelly is inspired by all things in nature and considers herself a painter of contemporary naturalism, interpreting experiences and observations in the field into paintings and drawings. A love of traveling to wild places provides ideas for her work, but she also finds inspiration closer to home, a farm tucked into her beloved New England woods. In the drawing basics section, Kelly contributed tutorials on drawing spiral patterns in plants, and in the specialized techniques section, she compared 3 relatively unusual leaves by painting the same subject 3 different ways. Kelly?
Hi, everybody. Boy, I'm not getting speaker view. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not getting speaker view. Anyhow, thank you for asking me to be a part of this book. Like everyone else, it's a great honor. And I'm coming to you from my gallery corner in my 3rd floor studio. I went and picked hydrangeas so everybody could see our New England hydrangeas. The rest of my studio is just about as messy as Wendy's. So this is my clean corner. So anyhow, when Robin and Carol contacted me and asked me to do this particular technique, Carol, you can put up the spiral tutorial. My first reaction was, oh my gosh, why me? Spirals scare the heck out of everybody. So for me, I was like, okay, I'm always up for a challenge. I'll take it on. And so what I thought about was it really made me have to articulate just how I observe things and how I go about the steps in realizing a full painting or drawing such as the camellia. And it really isn't that hard to find the patterns and specifically spirals. You just have to learn how to observe. It's another thing that Laura was talking about, and that's what so much of, and the base of all botanical art is learning how to observe. So I went through in my tutorial just the steps that I take to find patterns and more specifically the spirals. And I was a graphic designer, so everything for me starts with very loose little thumbnail sketches, such as what you're seeing here in number 2. Just trying to find the pattern, just trying to find the basic shape of my subject. And then for the spirals, you have to find the counterclockwise and the clockwise pattern, because everything fits within that pattern, that map. So the 3 different things that I have shown in this chapter are just different ways to find those spirals, and we talk about in the captions more specifically. The other thing that I thought about when I was trying to figure out how to do this chapter was, how do I help people find that spiral? And I came up with, you'll see in number 3 on the one that is on the screen right now, using digital tools, which we all have at this point, to help really try to create that map a little bit more in our brains as to what we need to follow. So I used, in that one, I used Photoshop and lay a green spiral over the clockwise spiral and a red spiral over the counterclockwise spiral. Things like Procreate, apps that we all have on our phones and our iPads, you can draw over your initial sketch in different colors to find your patterns, or use an overlay like I did with Photoshop. So Carol, if you can flip through just quickly, I'll go through all of those. So you can see the steps are the same. Find the basic pattern, find these spirals, the counterclockwise and the clockwise spirals. Cones are pretty cool because there's one spiral is pretty steep and vertical, you'll see in the red one. The other spiral is more shallow, the green one. But as you can see, the seeds, the pattern of the cone fits within the spirals. And you go to the next one, which is the artichoke. The artichoke has spirals, so I'm following the same steps in all of those. And even something like this sunflower, the little sunflower, the inside where the seeds are, the sunflowers follows spirals. Even something small that you're only pretty much going to show the hint of, you're not necessarily going to paint the entire thing. It's very helpful to do a little thumbnail sketch or a little drawing just to help you find the map before you go. So I think my words of wisdom would be, don't be afraid, just sit and observe, and if you look hard enough, you will find the spirals, and it will come easier to you. And don't forget that we do have digital tools at our disposal to use. I think it's a perfect marriage of using those with drawing to be successful in finding the spiral patterns in nature. So then we can go to the next one. So have fun drawing, everybody. So in the special techniques, I love that you guys asked me to do this, because different mediums are really what I love to explore. A lot of you know that I do that. And right now, I paint in all 3 of these, in addition to transparent watercolor. Right now, egg tempera is kind of on the top of my list of what I'm really enjoying painting with. So I thought that I would just do some quick, Carol, you can kind of pop through these because I'm just going to kind of talk about similarities and differences. So each of the tutorials, I show you my preparation, how I prep to paint, different things that I need to do to get ready to paint, and then the application of the paint for each of the different mediums. We talk about the substrates that you can use or can't use, and all the different various ways of applying the paint. So some of the similarities, they are all water-based mediums. You are able to clean your brush with soap and water. You don't need oils, you don't need minerals, you don't need any of that in the studio. They can all be used for painting light over dark. For those of you who are used to just transparent watercolor, having to leave your highlights light, it's kind of revolutionary. It's with varying degrees of opacity, you can paint light over dark, usually and mostly with the addition of white. Egg tempera is the most transparent of the 3. Gouache and casein can be used with water to create more transparent washes, but can also be used more opaquely with a more direct application, making them great mediums for quick color studies, especially useful for being on location when you're out in the field like Mieko, to get some quick color notes before all the mosquitoes start getting you or the light changes or you need to leave. They're just a much more immediate application than transparent watercolor. If you come from an acrylic or an oil painting background, these two mediums, casein and gouache, will feel more comfortable to you. Gouache can be reconstituted, meaning that once it's on the paper, 3 years from now, you can still lift it off the paper. Casein's really cool in that it will cure. So if you put a base layer of casein and wait a couple of days, you can paint over that without lifting up the color. This right here, if anyone can see in my little picture, is gouache over a casein tone. So that's a really cool thing. Egg tempera does the same thing. It will cure. So consecutive layers of egg tempera will not lift up underneath. And that's kind of, something that people who work with transparent watercolors aren't used to. Painting egg tempera is more like working with pencil. So pencil artists will find an affinity with the application of paint, the way you put paint on with egg tempera. You use many applied little brush strokes and stipples. Like transparent watercolor on vellum, you have to do many, many, many layers of egg tempera, transparent layers, to get that beautiful luminosity. But unlike watercolor, transparent watercolor, you're using white, and you're using a layer of white called a scumble in egg tempera. Gouache can be used on any type of paper, from thinner papers on up to illustration boards, but casein and egg tempera need to be on a rigid surface because they both will dry to a brittle surface tension. If you have them on something that's a little flexible, it can crack. So Carol, I'll show just a couple of quick little other things, because my last note to everybody is it's a book about botanical art and botanical artists, but it's such a wonderful group, just a compendium of everything that I think any type of artist or anybody interested in art and wanting to get started in art will find it invaluable. So here's this is my egg tempera painting that's in Abundant Future paint exhibition, but other things like applying, this piece is a casein piece. So I'm hoping that artists who are not necessarily botanical artists can see that there will be lots of applications of using the techniques and tutorials in the book to their own art. So I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Carol and Robin, for a wonderful, wonderful project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
So I wanted to mention, first of all, to thank these 4 artists here for participating today and for participating in the project. Altogether, about 70 artists contributed materials to the book, some full tutorials, some small spot tutorials, and some we used for images. When all these materials came in, Robin and I had developed a numbering system to try to keep everything straight. And so once we got all those materials, we received them, we edited the text, we edited the photographs, we organized, numbered everything, and prepared them all. And then Robin submitted those 75,000 words via a document, and over a period of time, I submitted a little under 1,000 images via Dropbox. And then both Robin and I breathed a great sigh of relief. But what you don't realize at that point is that there's a lot of the book left to go to get the book to this stage that you see now on your screen, which is a portion of Lizzie Sanders' tutorial about the orchid. After you submit the text and the images, you go through a period of editing the text with the publisher. They provide you with an editor, and their editor was terrific. And then the book goes to the design phase, and their designers, Timber's designers, were absolutely amazing. What appears in the mail is hard copy proof. And what a surprise it was to see the completely new imagining of the design. And you've all seen evidence of that here today. So when you get the proofs in the mail, you have these photographs. And I took these when I did the edits just as a way of remembering where the edits were, so that when I got the final proof, I would be able to check to make sure that the edits were completed. And so the edits can be anything from a single letter, for example, on this page of Lizzie Sanders' orchid tutorial, to some reorganizing of images and Derek Norman's pen and ink tutorial, and then kind of reordering an entire section. You saw the full page reproductions of these two images in the composition section. So all of these changes were done, and it just is really hard to imagine at this stage how beautiful and cohesive this combination of content and design will end up. And Robin is going to show some special images.
Well, ASBA has so many talented artists that Carol and I wanted to showcase as many as possible within the limits of the contract, AKA the number of pages. Even with that, a few things were left on the cutting room floor due to space. Most notably, the photos of materials we asked artists to supply, and they did so with great effort. So we apologize that after all that, they did not get in. One of the first things that botanical artists are asked is, how long did it take you to do this? So every drawing has every painting, every piece of artwork has an hour count on it. So you can see, it'll help people who are not botanical artists understand what goes into the creation of an artwork, as well as give beginning artists a concept of the meaning of a long time. Several spots were included, such as, you can see there, implying color with graphite. That features two artists, Katie Liness and Howard Goltz. That's, you can see the implication of color, and they're just using black and white. That's very, very good technique and a good thing to learn for beginners. Next one is Pen and Ink Stipple by master pen and ink artist Bill Moy. He was my shining example when I first started out, and his works are just absolutely amazing. If that doesn't make people want to pick up a rapidograph, I don't know what will. Next one is Joan McGann. She is also a master in stipple, and this was Carol's idea, and it was very interesting to show the different effect produced by illustrating the same subject, first in pen and ink, and secondly in colored pencil. So you can see the different effect that you get from each medium. And then in the watercolor section, we thought it would be very interesting to show a piece on color properties. What goes into making watercolor paints that we all use, and why do some act as they do? And so this piece on color properties was provided by Susan Fisher, who is an expert in color theory. And while the book focuses on botanical subjects, I really feel, as Kelly mentioned, any artist interested in realistic imagery can learn and benefit from the tutorials that are shown here. So I really hope that, you know, the book gets beyond botanical art. I'm happy if it stays in botanical art, but I really think it could help bring back a little bit of realism that isn't always taught everywhere.
So we wanted to end on this beautiful divider image of Jean Emmons' Pacific Northwest mushrooms, a painting that she did in watercolor on vellum, just so that we can all enjoy the beauty that botanical art creates. We wanted to mention how people can order the book. It's you can go to Workman's website, which is shown here on the screen, and order that directly from them. Of course, Amazon has it as well, and there are links to various other suppliers on Workman's site. And if you'd like more info about the book itself, you can look at our website as well. And we've got a little bit more description about the book there. So I wanted to thank everyone for participating, and we are going back to Jody right now. I'm going to take off the screen.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carol and Robin, and especially to our guest artist who joined us. And then I'd also like to thank our large audience at home that's joined us for this. It's really been rewarding to see the interest in the book, both in pre-sales as well as in participation in this webinar. So we're glad you joined us today. We maybe have time for just maybe one or two questions. Carol, is that okay? A couple questions for Laura Gastinger. If you might. Someone asked what type of sketchbook you use for your perpetual sketchbook and size, and then also how you deal with composition as you're adding new images over the course of many years.
Great question. So my book is custom made. It's made with Fabriano paper, and a woman on Etsy makes them for me, makes the books for me. Her shop is called Wonder Cabin. That's one word. But if you don't want a handmade book, Stillman and Byrne, the Zeta series I like a lot, or the Strathmore 500 are good. I just think it should be sort of, I like hot press paper, sort of heavyweight, like 140 pound, and I don't like spiral bound. And then this sort of size, like, is the best. So this is like 9 by 6. The question about fitting illustrations or drawings into cumulative years, it's a problem, but I think that's what makes it so exciting, how each page becomes like a richer building up of layers each year. So sometimes it's really hard to fit something in, especially if you are a prolific drawer. But you know, this is probably going to last me about 4 or 5 years, and then I'll get a new one. So I kind of decide, nature kind of ends up deciding what's in the pages. So I just try to squeeze it in.
Great. Well, thank you, Laura. We appreciate
Sure.
that. And we're about out of time, but if we can squeeze one other quick question in. Someone asked of Margaret Best if in the book you talk about using the lifting brush. They had never heard of being able to lift watercolor paper off, watercolor paint off the paper, and wonder if you cover that in your section of the book.
I believe I do in the serrated leaf, the silver maple. I have a section there where I mention at the end, you review the leaf, see that you've got good contrast, see that your highlights are as strong as you would like them to be, and if you've overpainted into an area, in other words, too much paint, you can take a lifting brush. A number of different people use, a number of different teachers offer lifting brushes. I use a particular one. Don't have it handy. I didn't anticipate the question, but I liked one with a chiseled edge, a soft brush, and I use the tip. It's made by the Spanish company. I do have one of them on my Escoda. And it's a nice soft brush, so it won't damage the surface of the paper if it's completely dry. And so you can, as you saw in Florence's leaf, you can subdue the veins that were too hard and open up that highlight.
Thank you. Thank you. So is Carol, would you like to show the image of the book?
Sure. Here's the actual book. These are our advanced copies, but Timber says that the book is shipping now. It's in warehouses, so the book should be arriving soon. And we've seen notices of some people posting on Facebook that they've received their copies.
And to close out, I guess I'd just like to leave everyone with a reminder that registration for ASBA's virtual conference is open now through October 9th. We would love to have you join us for that. And you can visit the ASBA website at asba-art.org for more information about the conference. And we hope to see you again online in October. Thanks for joining us.